One night, my girlfriend Meadow and I decided it would be fun to go bowling. We drove to the closest bowling alley and went through the whole process of renting shoes, finding balls, and picking a lane. We both were really bad, neither of us had been bowling in many years. We paid for an hour of bowling. Meadow wasn't really enjoying it too much because she kept getting gutter balls. I was doing better than her, but not by much, so I wasn't really able to help her out much. And then, to make matters even worse, Meadow's ex-boyfriend arrived with his group of friends and started bowling a few lanes down from us. Meadow looked away, refusing to even look in that direction, whispering at me that we need to leave now. We packed it up early and left. She went to the car and waited while I returned the shoes. I think her ex spotted me while I was at the front counter, and I looked away. I didn't tell Meadow this, though. We went home and agreed to play Wii bowling instead and have some wine. That sounded much more fun anyway. When we got home, the first thing I did was turn on the Wii and open a bottle of wine. The bowling alley trip was a failure, but I didn't want Meadow to be unhappy. We played Wii bowling for like half an hour with music on in the background and drinking wine. It turned out to be much more fun than the bowling alley, until the current song that was playing ended and we heard something come from upstairs. In that brief moment of silence, Meadow and I looked at each other, telling me she heard it too. I turned off the music for good, but now there was just silence. The sound we heard could best be described as a heavy object being dropped on the floor. I went upstairs to investigate. I checked every bedroom with the lights on. I checked under every bed. I was relieved to find nothing. I wasn't actually expecting to find someone in the house, but naturally, you do need to go investigate if you hear a suspicious sound in your house. Still, I wondered what actually made the sound because I didn't find anything on the floor. After maybe another half an hour of playing Wii bowling, we brought our little wine party upstairs to the bedroom and eventually Felka's a lightweight, so she got much drunker than me, which explains why I was the one to wake up in the middle of the night and not her. I heard what woke me up, though. It was another clear and distinct sound of something heavy being dropped from above. But the only thing is, now we were upstairs, and yet the sound still came from above. What else would be above us? The attic. The attic door is right outside my bedroom door. It's one of those doors with the string that you pull down, and a metal ladder comes down. I tiptoed out of the bedroom to not wake up Meadow. I stood under the attic door and listened. Every 5 seconds or so, I heard the slightest creaking sound, like from the weight of something moving around. I didn't want to scare Meadow, but I'd heard of animals getting into people's attics sometimes. I went to get a broom from the closet to use as a possible weapon if I were to have to fend off an animal. Then I quietly pulled the attic door open and climbed up. I stopped at the top of the ladder in the darkness and listened. I heard creaking. It was the creaking of the wooden rocking chair we had up there. I used my phone as a light to reveal the rocking chair. There was someone sitting in it, slowly rocking. I nearly fell off the ladder. I wanted to go run back to Meadow and hide. I wanted to do anything but approach this person, but I gathered the courage to yell, "Who are you?" The rocking stopped, and the man turned around to look at me. He started making this animalistic gargling growling sound. Then he got up, and that's when I hurried down the ladder and pushed the attic door up. I screamed for Meadow to call the cops until I heard her acknowledge me. I stayed under the attic door, preventing it from being opened as the man in the attic tried kicking the door open. He eventually stopped, and I heard the deranged laughter of a sick, mentally ill person. He spoke in another language. It sounded Russian. I felt like my arms were going to fall off holding up the attic door, waiting for the police. When they finally arrived, Meadow went downstairs to let them in. From here, it was the job of the police officers to go up there and remove the man. Meadow and I waited in the living room, sitting on the couch next to each other, until we saw them bringing the man out through the living room to the front door in handcuffs. The way the man looked at me said everything. He was a dangerous, mentally ill person. His stare was full of hatred and craziness, with the hint of confusion. His lip contorted in this bizarre way that would almost make you think he were drunk. Whatever happened with him, we don't know. We didn't press civil charges, but I'm sure he was charged criminally if they didn't deem him to be insane. This happened in the summertime when we keep the windows open, and so it was most likely that he squeezed through one of the windows in the backyard. I'm not sure why he picked our house. We may just have been the unlucky house he stumbled across. I had a really creepy experience the last time I went bowling. It was a couple of years ago. And I went to a bowling alley that's probably like 10 minutes from where I live now. I went with two of my friends, Nellie and Della. I had a really creepy experience the last time I went bowling. It was a couple of years ago, and I went to a bowling alley that's probably like 10 minutes from where I live now. I went with two of my friends, Nellie and Della. I had a really creepy experience the last time I went bowling. It was a couple of years ago, and I went to a bowling alley that's probably like 10 minutes from where I live now. I went with two of my friends, Nellie and Della. I can't remember how, but Lizzie had several games of free bowling at this particular alley, so we were using them. The place was actually pretty nice. There was also an arcade, a bar, and many food options inside as well. It was pretty busy that night, and most of the lanes, if not all of them, were being used. I remember that probably like 30 minutes into bowling, this employee guy came up to us. He asked us how everything was going, and we said good. He came back like 20 minutes later again and asked us once more, and then he said that our lane had had some problems recently. We said everything had been working fine, and it had been. The guy then told us to let him know if anything happened. We thought the place just had good service, and he was friendly. But the guy approached us again not long after that. He asked us if we were having a good time again, specifically me, and by now it seemed kind of weird how he kept coming up to us. This place was not like Topgolf or some bowling alleys where, as you're playing, you have a waiter or a waitress and they get you food and stuff. For this bowling alley, he just ordered food up at the counter, and it was like most of them. So I wasn't really sure why this employee kept going up to us and seemingly nobody else. After we told him that we were still having a good time, he asked us if we had any plans for later. We told him we were just hanging out and maybe we'd get some food. We didn't really know for sure. The guy then asked us if we lived around there, and we said yes. During this time, we were all in college but back home for the summer. This guy appeared to be around our same age, maybe slightly older. After talking briefly about how we were in college and stuff, he left. It just seemed like a friendly employee for the most part, but a little bit off. A short time later, though, I went back to the table behind our bowling lane to get a drink of water. When I did, the man was standing behind it. He told me that I was pretty good at bowling, which also indicated that he had been watching me. He then invited me to come back and bowl with him another time, saying we could bowl for free because he worked there. By this point, it seemed like he was probably interested in me, and that's why he kept going up to us. I was nice, but I told him that I was not much of a bowler and I would not be doing that. He tried convincing me for a moment, but then it was my turn to bowl again, and my friends called me over. I left, and they asked me why the guy was talking to me again. After this, I figured that he wouldn't be back, but only about 10 minutes later, he returned. He just walked up to us like he was part of the friend group. The guy told us that he was getting off very soon, and he was going to this club and asked if we wanted to join him. He then went on to say how the club was supposedly really hard to get into, but he knew the bouncer. We found this an odd thing for an employee to say to us and did not have an interest in joining him, so we declined. He finally left us alone after that. Now, at this point, we did not have much more bowling left and finished within probably 20 minutes after that. When we were at the counter returning our shoes to an employee, a different employee, she asked us how it went. Della told her that an employee of theirs kept bothering us the whole time. The girl working asked us who it was, and we described him to her. She was confused and said she didn't think anybody looking like that worked there. We looked around to see if he was still within sight. The place was really crowded. After looking around for maybe 10 seconds, though, I noticed him. He was sitting at a random table by himself, sipping a drink. When we pointed him out, she said she had no idea who he was but was confident that he did not work there. Then she told us she would be going to ask him who he was. At that point, though, we all just left. We had taken Della's car, and she drove the three of us. After leaving the bowling alley, we went to a local restaurant in town and stayed there for probably almost an hour. Then we continued back, and Della dropped me off back at my house. She pulled into the driveway, and I got out. Then they left. As I was walking up to my house, I remember hearing another car driving down the street. A street was usually very quiet, and I just looked over to see it. When I did, I saw the car come slowing down and appeared to pull over on the side of the road in front of our house. I was still walking towards the front door of my house, but I slowed down to see the person. What I saw next was the car pulling over and the driver's window rolling down. I saw that the same guy from the bowling alley was driving the car. I quickly hurried up to get inside. I got out my keys and tried to unlock the door as quickly as possible. While I was doing this, I actually heard the car door opening and then closing right after. I also heard footsteps and knew that the guy was approaching. Before he was able to get even halfway into the yard, though, I got the door open. I quickly went inside and then locked the door behind me. I hurried to find my parents and let them know of the situation. Maybe 30 seconds to a minute later, we returned to the front of the house and looked out of a window. When we did, the man and his car were gone. He had left, and after that, he didn't come back either. I'm still pretty creeped out by the situation. To go to my house, he must have followed my friends and me the entire rest of the night. I'm not sure what he was planning to do by going to my house. I'm just glad that he didn't come back. When I was a teenager, my close group of friends were, I guess, what you'd call delinquents. We liked causing trouble, breaking rules, and messing around in places we didn't belong. I grew up in a suburb in northern New Jersey, so I guess you could say we were just spoiled kids with nothing better to do. Looking back, the way we passed the time was a little silly, but there's nothing I can do about that now. Anyway, one of the things we really liked to do was to go exploring in the late hours of the night. Usually, we explored abandoned buildings, but not always. We actually got banned from our middle school after jumping through an open window, but that's a story for another time. This particular night, we were planning on executing a riskier task. There were 5 of us, me, Clinton, Elias, Liam, and Saint. Liam had just picked up a gig as an attendant at a bowling alley a few towns over from us. I'm sure you could see where this is going. He had been entrusted the key to close up the place the night before. Saint was a master of persuasion, and he somehow convinced Liam to let us explore the bowling alley at like 3 a.m. I'm telling you, Saint could convince someone to give them their kidney. That's how persistent he was. I haven't heard from him in a while. I think he might actually be in jail right now. Anyway, the 5 of us agreed to get a little drunk before going. We all had a substantial amount to drink, except for Elias, who refused to go anywhere unless he was the one driving. His dad had a really nice BMW, and Elias liked being able to end our nights when he got tired. After getting a little buzzed, James drove the 5 of us to the location. I was the heavy drinker of the squad. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's just who I was at that point in my life. Because of this, I usually took things a little less seriously than I should have, especially when it came to dangerous or risky situations. Liam unlocked the door and the 5 of us made our way inside. Clinton was usually the most cautious, and he kept trying to tell us to be careful in his hilariously high-pitched voice. Liam told us we couldn't actually do any bowling right now, which we were all a little upset about. I had the genius idea of doing some makeshift sliding on the lanes as if they were slipping slides. Since we were drunk, this was actually pretty fun. The 5 of us soon tired ourselves out and decided we wanted to do some exploring. We asked Liam if there were any back rooms we could check out, and he told us there were. We made our way into the employee-only area and Liam led us to some kind of storage room. We started poking around and flipping things over, just being stupid and careless. We figured Liam was going to get fired anyway, so we weren't too concerned with messing things up. As we started getting bored, we heard a deafening bump from below us. The 5 of us froze, staring at each other. Elias, the only sober one in the group, asked if the place had a basement. Liam looked just as shocked as we were and told us that he had no prior knowledge of a potential basement. Saint grinned, eager to continue exploring. Clinton seemed really nervous, telling us that we were probably going to end up getting Liam fired. We were whispering now, arguing whether we wanted to go look for this hypothetical basement. Just then, Elias lifted the edge of a rug nestled in the corner, revealing a hatch. We were shocked. The atmosphere in the room instantly shifted with the realization that the situation was now serious. Even if we had found the way into the basement, the sound we heard was still unexplained. I don't think any of us really wanted to go down there, but Elias made the first move in his classic level-headed style. He flung the latch open and stared down at the old rusted ladder leading into the darkness. "Screw this," whispered Clinton, motioning for us to leave. Elias ignored him and went for the stairs. He pulled out his phone and shone the flashlight into the blackness. Without another word, he descended into the abyss. I could tell Liam, Saint, and Clinton were a little scared, understandably. I still had a lot of liquid confidence, so I decided I'd go next. Saint followed behind me, and Liam brought up the rear. Clinton refused to come down with us. The 4 of us pulled out our phone flashlights and began exploring the basement that had been hidden for some reason. It was filled with dust and cardboard boxes stacked up to the ceiling. There was nothing else down there, or at least that's what we originally thought. A niche noticerner, and we walked over to it. Elias put his hand on the handle, but a split second before he was going to open it, we heard a distinctive bunk come from the other side, which sounded identical to the one we heard earlier. We looked around at each other with horrified looks on our faces. I could tell we were all thinking the same thing, an animal, maybe. No, shot, it was too loud to be an animal. I was pretty freaked out at this point, and turned away to leave. Like an idiot, Elias cracked the door open, revealing another storage room. That's not all that was in there, though. In the corner of the room, there was a human figure sitting on the ground with its legs crossed, facing away from us. We were frozen in place, utterly terrified. After a full minute of stagnant, the person in the corner of the room banged their head against the wall, explaining the sounds we had been hearing. I began tiptoeing to the ladder, careful not to make any noise. The rest of my friends turned around and began doing the same, clearly filled with terror. Just then, Liam tripped on a piece of junk on the floor and cursed. The person in the room yelled, and we ran. Elias and I were up the ladder in a split second, with Saint close behind. Clinton was leaned over, concerned with what he was hearing. Saint made it up, and the three of us ran out of the room. We heard Liam scream, "Get off me!" But Saint and Elias were too terrified to turn back. I ran back into the room and saw Clinton chucking a metal pipe down the hatch, which was followed by a demonic scream. Liam scrambled on the ladder, and Clinton grabbed his wrist, yanking him up. Liam ran toward me while Clinton slammed the hatch shut. The five of us sprinted out of the bowling alley, and Liam hastily locked the door with trembling hands. Elias drove us back with a blank look on his face. We listened as Liam described what happened after the rest of us made it up the ladder. Apparently, whoever had been in the basement jumped on Liam's back. Clawing at him, Clinton came to his rescue and nailed Liam's attacker in the head with that pipe, causing the lunatic to fall backward. Liam said he only saw the guy's face for a split second. It was the horrifying face of a dirty old homeless-looking guy with a bird's nest of hair on his head. Liam ended up quitting the next day without giving his boss an explanation. As it was definitely illegal what we had done, to this day, we have no idea how that guy could have gotten down there. Maybe there was an alternate entrance we had overlooked. Either way, the basement had been intentionally hidden, which tells me that Liam's boss might have known something about the whole thing. This experience ruined my taste for bowling, which I have not done since. This is something that happened back in the year 2004. I'm a female and was 24 years old at the time. I had just recently joined a bowling league because I have always enjoyed bowling. I was okay, but after the first time bowling with the team, I realized that I needed more practice. So, there was this kind of small bowling alley pretty close to where I lived. I remember that one night I asked a few friends if they wanted to go with me, but they were not able to. Instead of not going, I decided to bowl by myself to get the practice. That night, I went to the alley. It was not that busy, and like I said, the place was kind of small and also old. I got the lane on the very far right end of the alley, which was nice because it felt more private. I set my stuff on one of the several chairs they had right in front of the lanes. Nobody was bowling at any of probably the next 5 lanes to my left. So, I bowled a few games and was getting some good practice in. I'd been there for almost an hour when I turned around after bowling one time and suddenly realized that there was a man sitting at my lane. He was in one of the seats, not far away from my stuff at all. The man was sort of large, bald, and had a goatee, and from just his chin, the hair was really long. He also had several tattoos. I did not know where he had come from. He appeared to just be watching me bowl. I thought that maybe he would say something to me, but he did not. He just kept sitting there. So, I just kept bowling. It was awkward, to say the least, but I only had several more frames before I was done, and then I would be leaving. The man just kept sitting there the entire time. I thought about saying something to him, like asking him what he was doing, but I didn't. So, before long, I was done bowling. I went and sat in a seat just 2 away from him and changed out of my bowling shoes. Then I got my stuff. In that entire time, the man still did not say anything. After that, I went up to return the bowling shoes. The man did not get up when I did. After I had returned the shoes, I looked back to the lane that I bowled at, and the man was now gone. I figured that he left, and then I headed for the exit. There was a parking lot on the side of the building, which is where I had parked. I walked over to the side door, and there were 2 sets of doors. When I went through the first one, I noticed the man was standing in the small area between the next set of doors. I got a bad feeling when I saw him. I walked past and then out the doors and into the parking lot. Moments later, I heard the door open again. I knew that the man was now leaving, and I wondered if he was following me. There were several cars scattered around the parking lot. It was not well lit and pretty dark outside. The town was pretty quiet as well, but there were some other places nearby. So, as I was walking to my car, I heard footsteps behind me, and they sounded somewhat fast. I was going to my vehicle, but I just had a bad feeling about it. Just going with my instincts, I changed directions and did not go to my car anymore. I walked more towards the front of the parking lot where there was a sidewalk. When I turned, I heard the guy turning behind me. I walked to the sidewalk and then started going down it. I didn't know where I was going at first, but I saw that this bar was open just down the street. So, I started heading in that direction. The man behind me followed the entire way. However, luckily, he did not catch up to me but maintained a distance. It was very obvious that he was following me, though. So, I kept going down the sidewalk and was able to make it to the bar. I had only been there once before, so I didn't know it that well, and I didn't know anybody inside. But I went inside, and there were a good number of other people around, so I felt safer. The man went inside as well, though. I stood around near the bar, and the man stood at the other end of it. I then walked towards the bathrooms. I was going to go into the women's restroom and call one of my friends. Luckily, I did have my cell phone with me. However, when I reached the hallway where the restrooms were, I noticed that they had a back exit. So, I decided to just leave through there. The man would not notice because he couldn't see from where he was and probably assumed that I just went to use the restroom. I left and then literally ran all the way back to my car. Luckily, I was able to make it. I then drove home and made it back okay. I still feel to this day that I avoided possibly a terrible situation. I don't know who that guy was, but I know for a fact that he was following me. I went to that same bowling alley several more times and never saw him there again. I used to go bowling quite often with my friends when I was young, around 15 or 16. There was a bowling alley down the block from my friends and I, and so we'd go there on weekends. The bowling alley has been closed for years, but when it was open, it was super cheap and affordable, perfect for a bunch of young teenagers who didn't have money of their own. This one weekend, I went with my friends Conal, Farrer, and Dylan to the bowling alley. We always went at night, around 8 p.m. The bowling alley was always crowded on the weekends, and sometimes we'd see familiar faces. There was this older man who would sometimes be there alone, bowling on the adult side of the bowling alley, where alcohol was served. We always played on the non-alcoholic side. How we took notice to that man was because he'd sometimes just weirdly walk down the entire bowling alley, passing every lane, watching people bowling. Then, we'd notice him end up back at his lane, all by himself. We nicknamed him Guy Bullets after maybe the third time seeing him. Tonight, There was a lane open next to us, and guess who out of nowhere sat next to us? Bullets, or whatever his real name was. He was setting up a game on the lane next to us, by himself, and it wasn't long until he started trying to talk to us. He started making comments on our form, and every so often, interrupting our conversation to tell us weird things, like how long he's been coming here. Then, eventually, he said something really weird that he watches us play every weekend from across the bowling alley, and he decided to come over and introduce himself tonight. He played it off like he was trying to be some kind of bowling teacher to us, but really, it was just annoying and, most of all, uncomfortable. Bullets, at one point, entered our lane as I was up to ball, and he grabbed my wrist with his hands to position me into an allegedly better form. I never gave him permission to touch me, nor did I ask for his guidance. We cut our night at the bowling alley short because of him. We used the money that we would have used on more games on getting pizza instead, at a pizza place further out the block. When we came out, Conal and Dylan went their own way, since they lived on a different block. Farrer and I walked back down the other way, in the direction of our houses. As we did, the sound of a car engine starting made us turn around. We noticed an old SUV, like a Ford Explorer, making a three-point turn. We both imagined the possibility of it being deep Bullets. The SUV started slowly tailing us as we walked down the street, so we picked up our pace. Then, the SUV pulled up right alongside us, and the window rolled down. It was, in fact, the man from the bowling alley. He said out the window that he could offer us a ride home. We said no thanks. He replied, "It's not safe for a couple kids to be walking around late at night." We weren't even really that young. We were young teenagers, not little kids, and it was crazy that he thought we were young enough to trick into getting into a car. When we made it clear we weren't getting in, he pulled to the side of the road and parked his car. Farrer and I decided to start jogging home. When we reached the intersection where we'd split off, we said bye, and I continued jogging home. By the time I made it back, I was out of breath. Running after eating pizza is not a good idea. My dad was already asleep because he worked weekends. My mom was out with her girlfriends, most likely, and the same was probably the case with my sister. So, I wasn't supposed to ring the bell because my dad didn't want to be woken up. I went around back to get the key we had for the back door, which was hidden in the shed. When I got out from the shed, I thought I heard something, and I should have listened to my gut. I went to the back door to unlock it, and as I opened the door, I heard the sound of someone running up behind me. Before I could fully turn around, someone pushed me inside the house, covering my mouth and wrapping their arm around my neck. I wasn't able to see who it was because I couldn't turn my head. I scratched and clawed at his hand until I could move my mouth just enough out of the grip of his hand and scream, "Dad!" I may have only been 15, but I was able to put up enough of a fight to get him to lose his grip a few times, allowing me to scream. This undoubtedly scared him off, as he finally let go for good and ran outside. I didn't look back. I ran up the half flight of stairs to the main floor and yelled for my dad. My dad came rushing out of his room, and after telling him what just happened, he checked the backyard and all around the property, and then came back inside. I told him about the man from the bowling alley, how we nicknamed him Guy Bullets, how he followed Farrer and I, and his SUV after admitting to stalking us at the bowling alley. My dad filed a police report and tried getting the bowling alley to release Lance from that night, but they refused. I was never allowed to go back there after my mom found out about this, not that I'd ever want to. The crazy thing is, technically, I can't say with 100% certainty that the man who came in behind me and grabbed me was the man from the bowling alley, but realistically, how slim are the chances that it wasn't him?